I'm Doug Gusho. I'm a lab resident at Ohio State University. I'd like to thank the AATS Selection Committee for the privilege of the podium and the opportunity to present our work, as well as Drs. Naka and Slaughter for moderating this session, and Dr. Caterino is serving as a discussant. Here are our disclosures. Transplantation is often the only viable therapy for end-stage heart failure, and limited donor availability for heart transplantation has led providers to explore donation after circulatory death with promising results. Recently, two procurement strategies have been popularized in DCD heart transplantation: direct procurement and perfusion, or DPP, and normothermic regional perfusion, or NRP. Both strategies are promising. However, there remains limited data regarding the outcomes and utilization of each, as well as potential advantages of a particular strategy. Thus, our objective was to examine variation in the utilization of NRP at a national level. We hypothesized that while NRP usage has grown, both regional and center variations still exist. Adult heart transplants from January 1st, 2019 to March 31st, 2023 were identified utilizing data from the UNOS OTPN database. Transplants were classified as either NRP or DPP based on existing methods. The groups were compared for recipient, donor, and transplant characteristics, and unadjusted survival was assessed. Geographic variation was then classified by center, UNOS region, and recipient and donor state. 665 heart transplants met criteria for the final analysis. Of these, 300 transplants were identified as NRP procurements, and 365 transplants were identified as DPP procurements. There were no significant differences in baseline demographics, comorbidities, or waitlist time, or recipient pre-transplant support. There were significant differences in status prior to transplant amongst the groups, and those in the DPP group were more often status 2, while those in the NRP group were more often status 3, 4, or 6. Regarding donor characteristics, there was a significantly higher proportion of Black donors in the DPP group and Hispanic donors in the NRP group. Notably, there are no significant differences in donor comorbidities, cause of death, or ejection fraction. Regarding transplant outcomes and characteristics, those in the NRP group underwent transplant at centers with higher overall heart transplant center volume compared to DPP. Additionally, those in the DPP group had significantly longer median ischemic times, as well as donor allograft distance to recipient hospital. Postoperative length of stay, occurrence of dialysis, stroke, and pacemaker replacement, acute rejection before discharge did not differ between the two groups. Regarding survival, neither in-hospital mortality nor short-term survival is significantly different between the groups. Over a 4-year study period, there was an increase in incidence of heart transplants from DCD donors, which accounted for only 0.2% of transplants in 2019 and increased to 13.4% in 2023. There is a consistent year-over-year increase in transplant numbers for both DPP and NRP groups. The use of NRP rose from 6.7% in 2020 to 52.7% in 2022, where for a period it was more common than DPP. From 2019 to 2023, 44 centers used DCD hearts, while 33 centers used NRP and 36 centers used DPP. There were 8 centers that only used NRP, while 11 centers only used DPP. Regarding regional variation, UNOS regions 4 and 8 used NRP at a more frequent rate, while those in regions 1 and 3 used DPP more frequently. Region 2 had the highest rate of NRP use in the study period, however had a low number of DCD heart transplants, 11 transplants total. Regions 1, 5, and 11 used the most DCD heart allografts, with regions 1 and 11 generally utilizing DPP and region 5 preferring NRP. Overall, regions 2, 6, and 10 had the lowest use of DCD heart allografts. When analyzing state-level trends, recipients from Nevada, Tennessee, Texas, and Pennsylvania received NRP donors at a more frequent rate, while recipients from Massachusetts, North Carolina, Virginia, and Washington more often received DPP. Of note, Louisiana, Missouri, Montana, and Utah exclusively used NRP allografts for their recipients. However, all had less than 5 transplants total per state. When analyzing specifically where the donor procurement took place, those in Kentucky, Nebraska, New York, and Utah more often procured donors using NRP, while those in Massachusetts, Illinois, and North Carolina more often used DPP. Some limitations in this study include those inherent to large database analysis, including lack of certain data, in particular the reason for choice of DPP or NRP, its retrospective nature, and its subject to information selection bias. Additionally, because DCD heart transplantation and NRP are novel strategies. There's a significant lack of long-term data and outcomes surrounding this patient population, limiting the conclusions about this practice and impact of procurement strategy past this time frame. Finally, information regarding center choice and donor management were not available. NRP use is on the rise within the United States, and its use has grown tremendously since its inception several years ago. Currently, there are no differences in short-term survival nor postoperative complications. However, significant variation at the regional and center level regarding utilization of NRP and DPP exists. Ultimately, further determination of the impact of each strategy on organ procurement, hospital-associated costs, feasibility of extended travel and procurement, and graft function is necessary. Thank you, and I'll take any questions at this time.
Thank you.